A single family held the presidency, shaped American politics for generations, and buried more of their own than any dynasty in modern history. The Kennedys didn't just chase power, they paid for it in blood. Some call it a curse. Others see a pattern too deliberate to ignore. Either way, the body count is real, and the story goes deeper than most people realize. This isn't about political legacy or Camelot nostalgia. This is about what happens when ambition meets tragedy so many times that coincidence stops being a credible explanation. We're tracking the deaths, the scandals, and the moments when the myth cracked open to reveal something far darker underneath. Joseph Kennedy Sr. didn't build an empire through charm. He built it through ruthlessness that would make modern billionaires blush. Bootlegging during Prohibition, stock manipulation before regulations had teeth, and political maneuvering that turned favors into currency. By the time his sons entered politics, the Kennedy machine was already oiled with money that didn't ask questions and connections that didn't say no. Joe's ambition wasn't for himself. It was dynasty building, pure and calculated. He wanted a son in the White House, and he didn't particularly care which one got there or what it cost. That singular focus would shape everything that followed. The glory, yes, but also the wreckage. Joseph Jr. was supposed to be the chosen one. The eldest son, groomed from birth for the presidency, carrying his father's expectations like armor. Smart, charismatic, and aggressive in ways that made political sense in the 1940s. But World War II had different plans. In August 1944, Joe Jr. volunteered for Operation Aphrodite, a mission so dangerous that participation was strictly voluntary. He'd fly a bomber packed with explosives toward German targets, bail out mid-flight, and let the plane complete its journey as a guided missile. The plane exploded over the English Channel before he could jump. No body recovered, just fragments and questions about why the Golden Boy took a suicide mission when he had everything to live for. Some say he was proving himself. Others whisper he was running from pressure that had already broken him. Either way, the dynasty's first casualty set a pattern. Kennedys didn't die quietly in their sleep. With Joe Jr. gone, the weight shifted to John. Jack Kennedy never wanted the political life initially. He was sick, frail, and more interested in writing than campaigning. But his father's machine didn't care about preference. The second son became the first choice, and the transformation began. Medication kept his Addison's disease hidden. Speechwriters made him eloquent. Image consultants made him presidential. By 1960, he wasn't just running for office. He was selling a fantasy of youth, vigor, and a future that looked nothing like the 1950s. The 1960 election was closer than history remembers. Whispers of Chicago voter fraud, mob connections through his father's old networks, and deals cut in rooms where recordings didn't exist. Jack won, but the machinery that put him there left grease stains that never quite washed out. Still, he made it. The first Catholic president, the youngest ever elected, and the face of a movement that promised everything. Then Dallas happened. November 22, 1963. Dealey Plaza. The Zapruder film that Americans watched until the images burned into collective memory. One shooter, according to official reports. Dozens of questions that never got satisfying answers. Jack's head snapping backward. Jackie crawling across the trunk. Governor Connolly's wounds that defied the magic bullet theory. The more you examine the details, the less the simple story holds. Lee Harvey Oswald, a convenient communist with unclear motives, killed by Jack Ruby before trial. Ruby, a nightclub owner with mob ties, claiming he acted out of grief for Jackie. The Warren Commission concluded lone gunman, case closed. But the CIA files that stayed sealed for decades, the witnesses who died in statistically improbable clusters, and the ballistics that didn't quite add up, left a vacuum that conspiracy filled eagerly. Was it the mob, angry about Bobby's prosecution efforts? The CIA, furious about Bay of Pigs? Anti-Castro Cubans feeling betrayed? The military-industrial complex threatened by peace talks? Or something simpler, a disturbed man with a rifle and opportunity? The truth matters less than what the ambiguity created. A wound in American trust that never fully healed. Bobby Kennedy watched his brother die on television, like everyone else. Then he built his own path forward, transforming from ruthless attorney general into something resembling a genuine progressive voice. By 1968, he was the anti-war candidate, the champion of the marginalized, and the Kennedy who might actually deliver on the family's unfulfilled promises. His campaign rallies drew crowds that believed again. June 5, 1968. The Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. Bobby had just won the California primary, the momentum that could carry him to the White House finally building. He gave his victory speech, walked through the kitchen to avoid crowds, and met Sirhan. Multiple shots at close range. Bobby on the floor, bleeding from the head. Witnesses subdued the shooter immediately. This time, the assassin survived to stand trial. Sirhan claimed no memory of the shooting. Notebooks filled with repeated phrases about killing Bobby, a Palestinian immigrant angry about Kennedy's support for Israel. The official story checked boxes, but the forensics told a different tale. Bullet trajectories that didn't match Sirhan's position. Powder burns suggesting a second gun. Witnesses reporting a girl in a polka-dot dress fleeing and yelling about shooting Kennedy. Audio analysis indicating more shots than Sirhan's gun could hold. 2 Kennedy brothers, 2 assassinations, 5 years apart. The pattern was screaming now. The pattern wasn't just screaming, it was deafening. But the loudest voice in the family hadn't spoken yet. Ted Kennedy survived where his brothers didn't, which made him both the keeper of their legacy and the one who had to live with what came next. By 1969, he was the last Kennedy brother standing, positioned to carry the torch forward. Senate leader, presidential prospect, the natural heir to everything Jack and Bobby left unfinished. Then Chappaquiddick happened, and the mythology cracked in ways assassination never could. July 18, 1969, Martha's Vineyard, a party after a regatta. Ted left with Mary Jo Kopechne, a young campaign worker. His Oldsmobile went off Dyke Bridge into Pucha Pond. Ted escaped. Mary Jo drowned in an air pocket, trapped as the car filled with water. The timeline of what happened next destroyed any remaining Kennedy invincibility. Ted didn't report the accident for 10 hours. He claimed he dove repeatedly trying to save her, but his dry clothes contradicted that. He walked past houses with lights on, past a fire station, and returned to his hotel to consult with advisors before calling police. Mary Jo's body was found by fishermen the next morning. The official story was accident, disorientation, shock. The physics told a different tale. The car's position, the bridge's angle, the lack of skid marks. Investigators suggested speeds incompatible with Ted's version. The delayed reporting, the consultation with lawyers before authorities, the convenient loss of memory about crucial details. It smelled like damage control, not trauma. Ted pleaded guilty to leaving the scene of an accident. 2 months suspended sentence. No jail time. The Kennedy name still carried weight in Massachusetts courts, even as it was losing power everywhere else. The questions multiplied. Why that road at that time? Why didn't he call for help immediately? What really happened in those missing hours? Was Mary Jo alive when he left her, slowly suffocating in an air pocket while Ted constructed his defense? The answers never came, because the people who could have provided them chose silence or died before testifying. Chappaquiddick ended Ted's presidential ambitions before they officially began. The whispers would follow him through every subsequent campaign. The tragedy joined the family collection, another death shadowing Kennedy progress. But this one was different. This one had a survivor who chose his reputation over a drowning woman. The Kennedy curse narrative intensified. Jack, Bobby, and now this. But calling it a curse suggested forces beyond control, acts of God or fate. The reality looked more like consequences catching up. Joe Sr.'s mob connections coming due, Jack's recklessness with women and enemies, Bobby's prosecutorial zeal making powerful adversaries, Ted's entitlement meeting its limits. The pattern wasn't supernatural, it was structural. Power concentrated in one family, exercised without sufficient accountability, eventually implodes. The next generation inherited the wreckage. John F. Kennedy Jr. grew up as American royalty, the toddler saluting his father's casket, becoming the man who might reclaim what was lost. Handsome, charismatic, politically connected, he launched George Magazine, mixing politics and celebrity in ways that felt prophetic. By 1999, rumors swirled about a Senate run, maybe more. The Kennedy restoration seemed possible again. July 16, 1999. John piloting a Piper Saratoga with his wife Carolyn and her sister Lauren aboard. Flying from New Jersey to Martha's Vineyard for a family wedding. Hazy conditions, limited visibility. John wasn't instrument-rated, meaning he couldn't legally fly in clouds or without visual reference to the ground. The plane disappeared from radar. 3 bodies recovered from the ocean days later. The investigation concluded pilot error, spatial disorientation in hazy conditions. John lost track of which way was up, entered a graveyard spiral, and hit the water at high speed. The circumstances were clear enough. Inexperienced pilot, dangerous conditions, predictable outcome. But the family history demanded darker speculation. Conspiracy theories emerged immediately. Sabotage, planted bombs, assassination disguised as accident. The theories ignored simpler explanations. John made a bad decision, overestimated his skills, and paid the ultimate price. Sometimes the curse is just hubris meeting reality at terminal velocity. David Kennedy, Bobby's son, died from a drug overdose in 1984. Michael Kennedy, another of Bobby's sons, died skiing into a tree in 1997. Kara Kennedy, Ted's daughter, died from a heart attack in 2011 following lung cancer treatment. The list continued, each tragedy feeding the mythology. Car accidents, skiing deaths, overdoses, plane crashes. The Kennedy family tree looked like a casualty report. But zoom out and the pattern changes. The Kennedys numbered in the dozens across multiple generations. Statistically, a family that large over that many decades will accumulate tragedies. The difference was visibility. Every Kennedy death became national news because the family had made itself the story. They courted the spotlight, weaponized their image, and built power on public perception. The cost of that visibility was having every tragedy dissected under floodlights. The curse narrative also ignored the Kennedys, who lived long, productive lives. Eunice Kennedy Shriver founded Special Olympics and died at 88. John Kennedy Smith served as ambassador to Ireland and made it to 92. Ted himself served in the Senate for 47 years, despite Chappaquiddick. dying of brain cancer in 2009 at age 77. The surviving Kennedys continued in politics, business, activism. The family didn't end. It just stopped being destiny. What remained was the question underneath everything. Was the Kennedy curse real, or just the inevitable mathematics of power, privilege, and visibility colliding with human fragility? The answer depends on what you believe power actually costs. Joe Kennedy bought his way into American aristocracy through rum running, stock manipulation, and backroom deals with criminals. He wanted his sons to rule, and for a moment they did. Jack reached the presidency. Bobby nearly followed. Ted held the Senate longer than most politicians stay relevant. The family achieved exactly what Joe set out to create: a dynasty. But dynasties require maintenance. The Kennedys maintained theirs through image, not substance. Camelot was marketing. The new frontier was branding. Behind the polished photos were affairs, addictions, and alliances with people who don't forgive debts. Jack's womanizing wasn't charming recklessness. It was operational security risk. Bobby's crusade against organized crime wasn't brave idealism. It was betrayal of the people who'd helped his father build the fortune that funded their careers. Ted's survival past Chappaquiddick showed the limits of Kennedy power more clearly than any tragedy. He didn't go to prison because the system protected him. But he never became president because the public saw what protection looked like. The myth cracked. Not destroyed, just damaged enough that restoration became impossible. The Kennedy children who succeeded did so by moving away from politics. Caroline Kennedy became ambassador to Japan, then Australia. Respected positions, but not the presidency her father held. Maria Shriver built a journalism career separate from the family name before marrying into different power circles. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. went from environmental lawyer to controversial vaccine skeptic to political outlier. The family brand fractured into individual paths because the collective mythology couldn't support another generation. Consider what didn't happen. No Kennedy has won the presidency since 1960. No Kennedy has come particularly close. Joe's plan failed not because of a curse, but because American politics changed. The machinery that elevated Jack, the combination of money, media control, and machine politics, became obsolete. Television created the Kennedy myth. Cable news and social media made myths harder to sustain. Every skeleton eventually walks out of every closet given enough time and enough cameras. The tragedies that defined the Kennedy narrative were tragic, but they weren't mysterious. Jack died because he rode in an open car through a city where he'd made enemies. Bobby died because he walked through a kitchen where security was minimal. Chappaquiddick happened because Ted drove drunk off a bridge and left a woman to drown. John Jr. died because he flew a plane in conditions beyond his skill level. Each event had clear causes. The curse was just the story people told to make randomness feel meaningful. What the Kennedys actually proved was that power doesn't protect you from consequences. It delays them, sometimes for decades. But physics eventually asserts itself. Bullets find targets, water fills lungs, planes fall from the sky. The powerful die the same ways everyone else does. They just die more publicly. The family's response to tragedy became part of the mythology too. Stoicism in the face of loss. Grace under pressure. The Kennedy strength narrative. But look closer and you see dysfunction. Addiction running through multiple generations. Reckless behavior patterns repeating. Mental health struggles hidden behind public composure. The strength was performance. The private reality was messier. Joe Kennedy's original sin wasn't the bootlegging or the stock schemes. It was believing power could be inherited like property. He built a fortune and assumed his sons could convert it into lasting political dominance. What he didn't account for was that power requires constant renewal. Each generation has to earn it again. The Kennedy children inherited money and name recognition. They didn't inherit their father's ruthlessness or their brother's timing. The world moved on while the family tried to run the same playbook in a different game. The curse wasn't supernatural. It was structural. A family that concentrated too much ambition in too small a space, that courted too much attention while hiding too many secrets, that believed its own mythology until the mythology became a cage. The tragedies were real. The pattern was confirmation bias. People remembered the plane crashes and forgot the Kennedys who died quietly of old age because those deaths didn't fit the narrative. What remains now is inheritance of a different kind. The Kennedy name still opens doors, still commands media attention, still carries weight in certain circles, but it's no longer destiny. It's just legacy. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren of Joe Kennedy can choose whether to embrace that legacy or escape it. Some have, some haven't. Some are still figuring it out. The Kennedy curse, if it existed at all, was the curse of visibility. The cost of making your family the story is that every chapter gets written publicly. Every tragedy becomes mythology. Every failure becomes evidence of something larger than simple human error. The Kennedys wanted to be American royalty. They succeeded. And then they learned what happens when the crown becomes too heavy to wear. There's no curse. There's only cause and effect, stretched across decades and filtered through the distorting lens of fame. The Kennedys made choices. Some paid off. Some didn't. The accounting is still ongoing. The Kennedys didn't fall to a curse. They fell to the same forces that topple every dynasty that mistakes visibility for invincibility. Joe Kennedy wanted his sons to rule America. They did, briefly. Then the bill came due, paid in blood and scandal and wreckage that no amount of money could clean up. What's left isn't mystery. It's a lesson written in plane crashes and assassinations, and a woman drowning in a car while the man who could have saved her chose his career instead. Power protects you until it doesn't. Fame amplifies your victories and your failures equally. And no family name, no matter how golden it once seemed, can outrun the consequences of its own choices forever. The Kennedy story isn't about fate. It's about what happens when ambition builds a machine too big to control and too visible to hide. The curse was always just gravity, waiting patiently to pull everything back down to earth.